Alright, so without further ado, I would like to speak to you about scaffolding critical evaluation skills of A-level psychology learners. Okay, so how did I come about doing this investigation? Basically, it comes from the challenges of teaching A-level psychology. So what we tend to face with students is that we find that they have problems writing a critical evaluative essay. And in order to write a critical evaluative essay, we require them to be able to think critically. Okay, so when we say think critically in psychology, what I expect from students is this ability to understand and also apply their knowledge. So I don't want them to just memorize points and just put them down on paper. I want them to be able to understand, because in psychology, one of the major parts is to be able to apply what you know. So they actually have to use what they know, and they have to be able to design their own experiments. So being able to evaluate how something is a strength and weakness can actually allow me to see to what extent they understand how to use a certain method, and vice versa. Another challenge that comes with critical evaluative essay is their ability to link their points, which I will show you later. When I say link, it's part of the PO structure that we also use, as what Ms. Dina mentioned earlier. And finally, a structured argument. So students come into A-level psychology not knowing much about what to expect. If you say that, yeah, we're an essays-based subject, they can actually be really confused. So the way they structure their arguments can also be quite messy and unstructured, and sometimes even if you give them that direction, they're not sure how to fill in the blanks, and I'll emphasize on that a bit later on as well. Okay, so what I've done before is I've tried giving them sample essays. So I've tried demonstrating to them, okay, so this is what I'm looking for, this is what your arguments should sound like, or what a critical or an evaluative essay should sound like. However, what I find is that although it can be effective for some students, others end up just memorizing what you have just given them. So it's like memorizing a comprehension or things like that. Some learn from using keywords, so they learn how to structure their sentences, and from there, if they are able to do this, how they mature from a sample essay is that they then adapt. They adapt and then they grow. Maybe they grow their vocabularies, or they learn new ways to explain something, and so forth. But then that's the problem. It's just that I don't want my students to just end up memorizing my sample essays. I want them to be able to do their own essays. Because another problem I encountered was when they depended too much on the sample essays, if the question changes just a bit, they can't adapt it properly to the topic that the question is asking for. And that's a major problem. You lose a lot of marks, especially in your link, because suddenly everything doesn't make sense for them. Now, the second part is effectiveness of planning. I emphasize to my students constantly, please plan your essay. Now, some students, I'm sure that some of you have these students as well, is that it's not, they don't plan, but they are able to think on the spot. They don't like to plan, so that, okay, I don't need to plan, you know, so whenever you get their question papers back, it's always a nice, clean paper. And then you have students who depend on planning, and then they have quite a messy and jumbled up. Planning, to me, because I've told my student, tells me about your train of thoughts. So how you process information, and ultimately, in the end, how you're going to structure your information. And also in exams, if nerves are eating at you, planning can actually prevent you from forgetting or actually even triggering more information than under exam conditions. Thirdly is the significance of thought patterns and style. In psychology, we tend to do a lot of discussions, and I find that students have very individual thought patterns or cognitive styles. And one of the challenges that I face as a teacher is to be able to accommodate everyone's way of thinking. And how do I address it in class in general, and get them to, how do I direct them to think or guide them so that they come to a conclusion that can allow them to write an effective essay or understand the topic. And finally is the effect of language barriers. Now, language in psychology is a big thing and not a big thing at the same time. I've had students with poor language foundation, but is able to be creative and think outside the box. But secondly, I have had great English foundation students who have very limited psychology knowledge and aren't that flexible. So it's plus and minus, but there are some significance of language in psychology, definitely. So what did I do is I took one of the highest scoring questions in psychology, which revolves around evaluate and discuss the strengths and weaknesses of a certain topic. And this is worth 10 marks in AS, and in A2 it can be worth as much as 12 marks. And that's only for one question. There are multiple evaluative questions. So for this, we have a guide. We tell students, give us 4 points, so 4 paragraphs and 4 peel structures. That's their guide. Okay. So I use this as the pre-test and the post-test, but I use 2 different topics. So it's when they measure it, it's more valid. Now, this is a sample peel essay that I hope my students is able to achieve. So this is a sample essay that I've shown them, as well as, if you have a look here, this is a sample peel plan. So students, they can design their peel plans in 2 ways. This is one way in which they can do, where they go by a sort of process, okay, so that you can see the arrows. So in their head, some students work better with this, so they structure their thoughts in a process way. So what I tell them is, okay, so this is the point, so this is your point and your explanation of your point. Here is an elaboration, and this is your evidence as well, and then that's your link. Okay, so I broke it down to my students, and now this is when they first enter into psychology. I give them an outline. So I want them to try and achieve this quality of evaluative essay. Now this is another essay, same thing, but some students prefer to do it this way, where they break it down into the P, E, E, and L. So just for your reference, this is what they say before. So I teach the peel structure to my students at the beginning, and I tell them, okay, this is what it sounds like, and I give them a vocabulary list, so that from that list they can use various words to guide them in writing that essay. Okay. However, what students tend to struggle with majority of the time is this part here, the link. So I will show you in a moment what they tend to write. They always write really short links, and they lose a lot of marks because sometimes in this section here, they go out of point, or they have not elaborated enough in the explanation. So a link is really important to bring everything together and tell the reader, how does all of your content here link back to the question that they have just asked. Okay? So what did I do? I tried to do a class discussion. Okay, so at first, I get them to, after I finish teaching a topic, I say, okay, get into groups or work with the person next to you and discuss about evaluative points. After that, we hold a class discussion. So I might give them a whole lesson to do this, or I might give them 30 minutes, but over time, once they get used to it, the time gets shorter and shorter. Sometimes I even tell them to prepare in advance. I'll say, tomorrow we'll do an evaluation, so please prepare your notes for that. And after we finish the topic, we go straight into it. So for class discussion, it's broken down into several parts. During class discussion, I want them to do a verbal presentation. Now, verbal presentation to me, what I find is that it's very important, because one thing that psychology students lack is that confidence, that they know what they know. And being able to present it verbally, I find that they are suddenly more confident about their knowledge, as well as how to structure them, and so they are more confident in writing the answer down. And the clearer their answers are. Second reason as to why I wanted a verbal presentation is so that the students can listen not only to how other people phrase their answers or structure their answers, but also to how they sound when they structure it. A lot of my students, when they come into class, they just look at the board and they listen to you talk. Or they read, but then they never really analyze themselves, the way they do things. So I think by verbal presentation, we can improve a lot of things, including their own language abilities. Secondly is asking facilitative questions. So when whatever answers, points they explain, I ask them, if need be, why, how, and so what. So I have to pick on the relevant parts, and then I facilitate further. And then Lastly, for class discussion is identification. So at the end, after the students present their points, I would then ask, okay, the class, what's missing? Or how can we improve this essay? So I don't want to spoon that. I want them to listen to other people's answers, okay, and identify what is missing from that essay. So basically, marking another person's verbal evaluative essay. So they have to actually pay attention to what people are saying. And then finally, I assess their essay writing to see whether or not everything has registered. I broke the method down into 3 phases. Phase 1 is when you first implement it, so you have to build a foundation, a culture. Okay, so I sort of guided them more at that time. So what I did was I told them to give me the points. Okay, so give me a strength of so-and-so. And they would give me the points in the form of very short PL structures. And then I would take the points and I would verbalize it into a structured essay. And I would say, okay, so let me get this straight. This is what, if I convert your points into an essay, this is how it will sound like. So I would turn it into a standard essay verbally, and then I would ask the rest of the class, okay, what do you think is missing from this essay? And then so they have to really pick out the points and then identify it. Okay, so that's that. And then once I feel that the class has understood what I expect and how this is going to be run, I then flip it around. So when they give me their points, it's already going to be in a structured essay form. So instead of me converting their points to an essay format, they are going to verbally present their points. And then the same thing goes again. The class will then evaluate or mark their verbal essay on what is missing. And then finally, it's all student-driven. I then let go. I then just say, okay, give me a point, and then they will automatically do all this. And then this is what I observed is that the students did naturally go into phase 3. It wasn't hard. All I had to do was to get from phase 1 to phase 2 was just say, okay, now you try to do it. I'm not gonna verbalize your essay. You try and tell me how you would write your essay verbally. And then all the evaluation and marking each other's essay, they did that naturally. They even facilitated it naturally. So I just say, okay, so what is this enough, and so forth. And then they're like, oh no, maybe they could have done this, or they did not mention this. So they conducted their own assessment of other people's essays as well as themselves. Some students, once they heard how they verbalized their points, they then said, oh, I did not mention this. But then they already had their essay plans in front of them and they didn't realize it. Only until when they verbalized it, they noticed that it was missing. Sometimes students mindlessly write their points, they convert their plan into essay, and then they submit it in thinking that that's it, that's done. So, the findings. Quantitative-wise, summary, students were able to provide more critical points. They were able to provide more body of explanation, and their marks increased quite well. So more than 85% scored between 7 to 10 marks out of 10, and more than 90% actually showed an improvement from their previous essays. Okay. And qualitative, which is the most important part, students who were quiet became a bit more confident in what they wanted to say. You just have to sort of pick them out and just say, okay, just give it a go. Students who are already outspoken were able to produce their answers without sort of going or stutter. They have, over time, they have a fixed structure. They knew how it sounds. Structure-wise, they suddenly understood the flow of the PL structure. So one of the problems, even though I presented them, I taught them on the PL structure, some of them still didn't understand, how does the PL structure work? Where did the right information go? Okay, so over time, this was very helpful. And again, body of content. So the quality of what they put into their essay improved as well. So if I showed you an evidence, so like I said earlier, link is very important. So during the pretest, one student produced this link, very short. This study is considered to have high validity. If they were to verbally produce this to me, I would then ask them, why does this lead to high validity, or how does it lead to high validity, or so what? Okay, And so they have to then tell me. And then so after our class discussion and so on, the same student was able to elaborate. This leads to increase in confidence that the independent variables are what affected independent variables. They knew what validity meant, because this here is not a link of a study. It's a definition of validity, or a definition it's more of just stating something. You're not explaining why did you say, or why are you saying that this study has high validity. And so there's an elaboration there. Or, and again, another student says, thus this will cause generalization issues. How does it cause generalization issues? So what if it causes generalization issues? What does it tell us? And so after that, they were able to elaborate again. So the results obtained might only be representative to people around the area of that school. This creates generalization issues. They were able to bring together their ideas. So, other than what I mentioned before, some takeaway message is sample essays have limitations. Even if I give them past paper questions to repeat over again, discussions is also very important. So effective discussions is important in heavy content-based subjects. So subjects like psychology, where there's a lot of just information and just like all these theories and words, discussions might be an effective medium. But then it's not only simple discussion, it's how you design that discussion as well. So the design of the scaffolding to accommodate students' need. So it's really difficult to pick out individual students. So for some reason, through this method, I was able to accommodate most of the students, and those I couldn't accommodate was very minimum, and I could just pick them out and say, okay, come and see me, and then I can try and see where is it that you're going wrong. And finally, it is important that at the end, it is them that is driving the discussion, that you have minimal facilitation at the end of the day. Right? And that is it.